Welcome to the Tough Fish Show. I am so excited to bring you this extra special episode with Alexa Bigwarfe. Alexa, I am so glad you are back on the show.
I am glad to be back. We always have such a fun time when we're talking. So I was thrilled that you asked me to come for another round.
Yes, I'm so glad you are here. And when we talked last, we really talked about like the publishing space and thinking about your target reader and the publishing space. But since then, you've made some pivots in a way. Your writing has shifted a bit, and I would love for you to share, and let's talk about that.
Yeah, so my obviously if you caught the first episode, and if you didn't, I'll just give you a little bit of background. I started in nonfiction, in grief and loss, actually, and then moved into parenting and eventually started writing books for writers because I'd been building a community and a business around supporting authors who were going through the journey of self-publishing or other elements too, not just self-publishers, but largely indie publishing based. And throughout that process, I have always wanted to write fiction. I've wanted to write fiction since I was a little girl, but my life took me in a totally different direction. But eventually I decided I was going to go down this road. And I've been working on a couple of different books throughout the years. And the one that I thought would be my first book was a World War II historical fiction, because that is where my passion lies. I love everything about World War II. But I had this story that I just could not shake. I just could not, like, no matter what I was doing, I just kept coming back to Callie and her experiences in Paris, which, by the way, are based heavily on my own experiences in Paris in 1999. And I just, for reasons with things going on in my own personal life, because of my separation and divorce, because of COVID, because of all of these things, like, I could not focus on writing a heavy book about World War II. I needed something fun and that made me happy and that made me think of the really good times of my life. So I started writing 4 Days in Paris. And after years and years of working on it, it is finally in the final stages to be published in December. So yay!
I am so excited that you did that because, I mean, you're right. It doesn't mean that you won't write the historical fiction or that it doesn't show up in places, because
Right.
even in 4 Days in Paris, that love is coming through. You can feel it in Callie's character.
Yeah.
But I love that you were following that little voice inside, basically, that's saying, hey, you need to write me. Hey, you need to
Yes.
write me. Because that's what it feels like, is that there was this little nudge, this little pull, like, I'm not going away. So we're going to have to figure out this book together.
I'm not going away, and you're not writing anything else until you get me on the pages and out into the world, is what was happening. So I was like, I finally succumbed to it. And I was like, all right, here we go. I never envisioned myself being a romance rom-com, whatever. It's kind of hard I'm branding it as rom-com because there is some humor throughout. And I think that's the easiest. It's really a chick lit book, but they took away the chick lit category. So, it's fun, but it's friendship and it's love and it's romance and it's Paris. I mean, Paris.
So talk to me about the writing process then. Talk to me about, like you were talking about, it took some time to get that first draft really going in a place that you felt you were ready to do anything with it. Would you talk about what that was like, and then like your journey to get it to this point to be getting published at the end of the year?
My writing process was nothing shy of just straight ugly. I've learned so much in the writing of this book, and I have so much advice I could give to new writers who are trying to write their first fiction book. I am a pantser, mostly because I'm very ADHD and I don't do well sitting down and trying to be structured and organized. But I will tell you that I wish, and for my next book, I actually have a chapter outline and I'm trying to be a bit more organized and yes, your book can change as you go and your storyline and your characters may take you somewhere else. But I had no plan other than I knew how it was going to start and I knew how it was going to end. And that was fine until I got to the middle. And then I was like, oh crap, I have no idea how to get it from through the messy middle. There's a good reason they call it the messy middle. And so, originally, I'm really busy. I'm a single mom of 3 kids. I run an enormous business, which is actually about 4 businesses in one. I do a lot of advocacy work and volunteer stuff on the side. So finding the time to squeeze in writing was very difficult for me. And I knew without some skin in the game, I would never get it done. So I actually hired a writing coach, and she was more of a writing accountability coach for me, because we had a plan that every Friday we would meet to go over the chapter that I'd given to her. And I had to give her a chapter by Wednesday or Thursday at the latest. So that in itself was a huge momentum changer for me, because I had this pressure of not wanting to waste her time. And also I was paying for that moment. So I was like, you're not just going to throw money at this. It's not like my gym memberships where I just pay the membership every month and never went. No, I was going to make something happen with it. So that was huge. And it helped me just sit down, and I wrote the book mostly. In the beginning, I wrote the chapters that were easy for me to write, the ones that I knew. But what I found when I finally got back and started trying to write chronologically, a lot of the story changed. Characters changed. Incidents that I thought were important were taken out. The trajectory of the story changed. Originally, I had one character that I planned to have come off as really kind of a girl you wanted to hate in the story. And there was a lot of tension between them. And I realized I wanted the book to be more about their friendship, not their problems. So her character completely changed. So basically, my process was just to have a deadline to write a chapter per week and to get through it, no matter how terrible it was. And I just sat and I wrote. And that was great, because, as you'll hear from author after author after author, like the first draft doesn't have to be wonderful. It just has to be words on paper. And then, but I will say, from doing it this way, the revision process, I feel, took a lot longer, because it needed so much work to get it from point A to point B. However, I give myself a lot of grace, because I'm a first-time fiction writer. I knew nothing about writing fiction. I had to stop and read a lot of other books and see how they were structured, how they were written, how you describe scenes. I started going to a writing critique group. I started taking classes, attending some of the other conferences that were on writing craft. And really, that part took me a long time. And I think that's something that first-time fiction writers who don't have a training, who don't have an MFA, who've never taken creative writing courses, like, to me, that's a big thing that you need to be aware of, is that it's going to take you time to learn the craft.
Well, and what you've said too, I love how you framed that, because you have a lot of experience with nonfiction writing.
Mm-hmm.
You have tremendous experience with nonfiction writing, especially prescriptive nonfiction.
Right.
So to make a transition like that, yes, it's writing a book. Yes, it's publishing a book. However, the writing is still different. It's you're thinking about it differently, you're approaching it differently, and the expectations are a little bit different too.
Oh, yes.
Your reader is different, but what you're creating, you're doing different things in those books. But on the surface, it seems like, well, I'm writing a book. Oh, okay. Yes. And there's more to it when you start getting into the nuances of the type of book. So that transition that you made from nonfiction into fiction, how did those critique groups help you, or how did all of these pieces that you did, reading the other genre, reading more in the genre, working with the accountability writing coach, working with your critique groups, how did all of that help you make that transition smoother? Not necessarily easier, but a little bit more smoother for you.
Well, my writing coach at the beginning, she was great, because she is she's a very successful author in this genre. So even though the writing that I gave her was just, literally, sometimes I just pumped it out in an hour on Wednesday night and sent her something. So, she didn't have much to work with in terms of taking it to the next level. But what she was really good at was saying, things like, be careful not to go into too much backstory here, and don't pull your readers out of the story by adding this or that in there, or this would be really funny, or this is really overused, or things like that. From her perspective as a very successful writer in the genre, she could provide that type of critique that was just like comments, and of course we met in person and talked through it. So she was also great at giving me a bunch of extra resources, where to find like a beat sheet, where to learn about tropes, because these are all things that I did not know anything about. And you might know about them subconsciously. Like, you don't realize when you're reading a romance book that it's, enemies to lovers, or best friend's brother, or second chance romance, or whatever it is. Like, you recognize that as a reader, but as a writer, you don't necessarily realize that you're recognizing it, right? Or that you have to make that part of your story. So she was really fantastic in encouraging me to not only read in my genre, but giving me just tons of books that she had read, or different things that I could go out and read to help that. And I will tell you, the number one thing, and it's so funny because I've heard other authors say they don't read in their genre because they don't want anyone to think that they've stolen their stories. Well, here's the thing. There's no new story out there. Everything has been written. Every possible scenario. Well, I can't say every possible scenario, but almost everything has already been written. You're not going to steal someone else's idea because you're writing a story that's different from that. It's coming from a different perspective. I learned as I was writing 4 Days in Paris, 4 or 5 people told me, oh my gosh, have you seen the Ethan Hawke movie Before Sunrise? Or I think it's Before Sunrise is the first one. And it's a very similar story to mine, where this couple meets randomly and they wind up walking around Paris all night long and getting to know each other. But the actual so that concept is the same, but the storylines are so different behind them. So you have to be reading in your genre for a couple of reasons. One, it helps you read differently. You're not reading for pleasure necessarily. You're reading to figure out how other authors structure their book, how they structure their sentences, how they describe a situation. And for me, this was really important, because one of the hardest things for me in transitioning from writing very technical nonfiction type things to fiction was knowing how to describe a scene so that my reader is in the scene with me. I did not know how to do that. And I did not know how to show versus tell. I did not know how to describe those feelings. You don't just write. This is how I wrote in the beginning. We looked into each other's eyes and I felt warmth spreading all over my body. Okay. Yeah, but that's not really like, that's something, but that can be described there's a whole lot more that can go into describing how he's reacting, how she's feeling, what's happening, and put it in a very action-centered way, right? So that's a lot to learn, and the more you read, the more you can do that. So that was a big piece of it. And then in terms of the writing critique groups, going and sitting with other writers and having the opportunity. I didn't read for a long time in these groups. I just went and read the pages that other authors were providing and listened to the feedback that other more seasoned writers were giving. And just that alone, just hearing the comments that people were saying, like, don't block, don't have all these actions that are blocking. I went to the kitchen, I pulled out the meat, I closed the door. Like, you're slowing the reader down when you're doing those like action blocking, right? So hearing those types of things was great. And then of course, you were a big part of helping me as you went through the developmental part, and really helped pull the places out where there were details missing that would be important to a reader that I wasn't even thinking about. Because as we're writing the book, we see it. I see it like a movie in my head. I know exactly what's going on. I can see the full scene. I've been to Paris. I've lived in Paris. I knew exactly what was there. But for somebody else who's not in that apartment with these girls and have no idea what they look like, what the apartment looks like, how they're responding, all those types of things, like that was an important part of the process, to have somebody saying, think about this, add this. The reader wants to know, if they just took this action and you never say anything else about it, like if they have a bag in one scene and then you never hear about the bag ever again, like readers notice those things. I noticed those things as a reader. I'm like, wait a minute, she's taking pictures, and a minute ago you're like, where'd the camera come from? Or she set the camera down and you never hear about the camera again. And I'm panicking as a reader thinking, oh my gosh, did she leave her camera on the steps at the Eiffel Tower, like, where's the camera? So those types of things.
So, so go into that a little bit more, if you would. Tell me a bit more. So you go through you're going through the next part, really, is what you're describing. You have created the story, you've worked with the writing coach, you have the accountability, you have a skeleton, you have a structure, you have something, you have meat on the bones, if you will, of this skeleton. And you still worked with it before ever engaging me, for instance, or when you chose after that, and then you're ready to work with beta readers, you still did things in between then. So how did you decide, like, where you were? How did you work through that? And knowing when to accept the feedback and when to go, no, this is the vision, or this is where I am. Thank you, but no, thank you.
Yeah, that's a hard question to answer, because I think that as much as I'm frustrated by how long it took me to get here, I also think that the timeline was really good for me too, because there were times when I had to, for example, I run a big conference every March, the Women in Publishing Summit. So January to March, there's no time for writing. There's no time for anything. But you're always thinking about, at least I am always thinking about my book in the background, in my subconscious. So little things like, I would hear music that would make me think of what might have been happening in a scene or emotions. I would go for walks. And even though I wasn't actively working on the book, as I'm walking around, I would be thinking about the book, and ideas would come into my mind of like, oh, this scene could be strengthened by talking about this or adding in this piece, or I'd totally forgotten about this. So even though I wasn't actively working on the book, I would be walking around and I'd pull up my notes taker in my phone, and I'd just take notes of little scenes that I wanted to add back in, or ideas and things like that. So I was still actively working on it in a very inactive way, even though it wasn't really coming forward that much. And I'm, listening to other people, I'm reading these other books through this time frame, I'm doing all the things. And as I heard a phrase that I really liked, if I was listening to an audiobook or reading another book, if there was a phrase that I really liked that described something really well, I would write that down, not to plagiarize that phrase, but to have that phrase there as an example to me when I went back to rewrite. So, but really, I mean, I did not do a lot of self-revising. I did a lot of addition to what was there. And then as I worked on improving the craft, if I could think of better ways to phrase something or write something or a scene that I thought was stronger, I would go back and just kind of add those in. And then when you came on board, so if I were to do I think everybody should start with a developmental editor when they have a really bad first draft, just because, or their first draft. It doesn't have to be a bad first draft, but a first draft is never good. So I'm not insulting anybody by saying that. Like, a first draft is a first draft. Some of you are blessed enough to write first drafts that don't need as much revising as I did. But you're shaking your head at me. I'm not being down on myself. I'm just the reality is I approached it in a very disorganized manner, which made it harder for me in the long run to pull it together, if that makes sense. But it was a process that I learned from, and in my next book will do things differently to hopefully speed up that part of the process. But bringing somebody in earlier, even though the writing needed a lot of forward movement, we will say, like, just being able to have those things pointed out and have somebody else's perspective and have somebody helping me enrich the places that really needed more development, which is the whole purpose of a developmental editor. That helped me, because when I was going through those, then I was also looking at those scenes and rewriting them with the knowledge base that I had gained in the past, year of reading other books and really throwing myself into the genre and owning that I was going to write, a rom-com. So then with the beta readers, the mistake that I made before I went to beta readers was that I should have I should have, in a perfect scenario, done one mega round of self-editing before I sent it to beta readers. Because when you get to the beta readers, no, you don't want it to be a perfect book. Obviously, it generally won't have gone through copy editing, but you also don't want to slow the beta readers down so much that they're so caught up in the errors that are still there, like tons of repeated words, or even when I'd copied and pasted entire sentences being repeated elsewhere, or things like that. So I do wish that I had taken the time to go through a pro writing aid and clean it up a lot more before I sent it to beta readers. However, they were very graceful, and I warned them, and most of them kept to a very high level and gave me some really great feedback that helped me adjust some scenes there. But pro writing aid was an amazing tool to help me clean up repeated words, to help me see how many times I was using ing words, to help identify passive voice, those types of things that can really help you improve the structure of the book. And that made a big difference. So yeah, just, I mean, I hope, did I answer that question?
Very well. I mean, and that's the thing, like trying to understand how to, or help other writers to figure out how to bring them in different places to look. You've been covering that, and that's really cool. So let's move forward a little bit even more. And one of the things that I know you chose to do with this book is to use a pen name.
Yes.
So would you talk about that decision, and also like how you're working through that?
Yeah. So, the best part of what I do as a career, especially with running the Women in Publishing Summit, is that I get to interview, and through the Publisher podcast and through all of those types of things, I am constantly in connection and interviewing and learning from so many others in this industry. And a few years ago, Kirsten Oliphant, who writes by Emma St. Clair, did a really, really good presentation for our community on writing to market and on finding your readers and all of those things. And she has 3, maybe 4 different pen names that she uses. And that was a big topic of conversation in that. And it's been a big topic of conversation in our community ever since, like whether or not to use a pen name. And the thing that most people jump to right away is feeling the pressure of, oh my gosh, now I have to have another social media, I have to have another website, I have to have another, all of those things. But the reason that I chose, it's 2 reasons. And the first reason is a very easy one. And that is, I have been working so hard in this book, and quite honestly, I didn't want to publish it under my ex-husband's last name. So I went back to my maiden name, and I wanted a different, I wanted to separate myself out from who I am as a nonfiction writer and who I am as the Women in Publishing Summit host and all of those kinds of things. So those were 2, that was the first major reason. But the second major reason really boils down to marketing and to readership. Because if you look just at Amazon as an example, the marketing piece is really important for you to have a very clear position of yourself in your genre. And yes, there are successful authors who write lots of genres and have different types of books out there. Kristen Hanna is a great example when you look at the Nightingale historical fiction versus Firefly Lane, which is more contemporary women's fiction. Those are very distinctly different, but she made a name for herself first as kind of a, and then she's a well-known author, so she can write pretty much what she wants to. For indie authors, as we're getting established and we're just finding our roots as an author that people follow, having a clear distinction of your genre is important. Because when someone goes to Amazon and they're looking for books, and this is a lot of what Kirsten was telling us about, like your books will be recommended to people based on what other people have bought of your books. That's a big thing. So if my books were Sunshine After the Storm, a survival guide for the grieving mother, and Lose the Cape, realities for busy modern moms and strategies to survive, and then Ditch the Fear and just write it, Ditch the Fear and just publish it. Like these have absolutely nothing to do with rom-com. So as Amazon's figuring out their algorithms and where to place my books and all of that, if I had positioned another book out there under my other author name, Alexa Bigwarfe, then it may have caused some confusion in that way. Also, you have to consider the backlist thing. So say somebody comes in and they love 4 Days in Paris and they want to see what else I'm writing, and they look back and there's absolutely nothing else in my author profile that looks interesting to them. They may not follow me. They may not ever look at another book from me. They may not do all of those things. And you want people to have, to be able to follow you. You want your book to be showing up, to be trending, to be showing up in the also bots, to be showing up in Amazon's recommended books. And a lot of that is based a lot on algorithms and back end things that Amazon's doing. So that's one thing. And then just creating that brand as a maybe not forever a rom-com author. I don't think that rom-com will be my, where I land and where I stay forever, although this is going to be a 3-book series. It at least positions me as an author that writes fiction stories that are based in, Paris, and that are heavily on friendship and these types of things. So that's really, I mean, we could talk, there's a lot bigger reasons that I'm sure I could tell you once I get farther into it. But the biggest thing is it's confusing to people if you're, one day talking about grief and loss and publishing a book on grief and loss, and then another day talking about parenting, and then another day talking about, stuff for writers. So you really want to create that group of followers and fans that love you for writing in the genre that they follow. And I really see this as I'm digging into my social media. I've created an Instagram account for Lexi Haddock author, and I've been spending a lot of time finding the bookstagrammers and looking at their accounts and seeing what they do. And when they're considering whether following me back and engaging me back, they're going to look at what I'm posting and what I'm doing. And again, if it goes back to my other things, or if I'm talking about stuff for writers, readers aren't going to want to follow that. But if they see me posting about my book and books that are similar to my books and things that they love to read and promote, then they're going to follow me back and hopefully sign up when I announce that my arc is ready.
I love that. I love how okay. And you segued very nicely into the next thing I was thinking about with this, because you have a lot of experience with, to your point, marketing, publishing, the writing world, the community in and of itself. So, but with this book, it's going to have its own launch, its own marketing space. It's all the things that you think about for every author's thinking about it for their books. And this is happening too. Are there some suggestions or things that you're thinking through specifically because you are trying to show it in its own space of, separating it somewhat from, like you said, the other types of books you've done?
Yeah. So I run a program called Book Launch in a Box, and it's an annual program that runs for 13 weeks, generally in the summer. And because I was also in the process of finalizing and launching my own fiction book, I've been going through my own program as a student, which has been really eye-opening because, you know the concepts behind things, and you know how to teach people exactly what to do. And this is not the first fiction book I've launched. Through Write, Publish, Sell, we've launched and marketed many fiction books. So this is not my first rodeo on the fiction book, but it is the first time that I am also the author and that I'm expected to do the work that I'm telling other people to do. Right. So it's been a very interesting experience, coming at it from that way. I'm happy to know that my program works. It's hard work. But the things, they're set up for a reason, and we're doing it. But as I'm going through this, I find myself in the same seat as all of our students who are desperately trying to figure out how to make their Instagram accounts grow, who are trying to figure out, how to connect with readers, how to do all of these things. And one of the things that I find to be the biggest difference between nonfiction and launching a fiction book is that when you're a nonfiction writer, you're often talking about your expertise. You're often talking about the things that you can help someone with. When I'm talking about writing tips for authors or book marketing for authors, I'm out there, I'm giving information that the people who follow me are going to want to know. When you're launching a fiction book, you have to completely reframe the mindset to what do readers want. They don't want to be taught anything. They don't want to know necessarily about your day in the life of the author. Some people do, but usually that piece happens when you are a known author. Like then they're really interesting. Like, ooh, this Lexi Haddock, I just saw her book, or let's use a better one, Allie Hazelwood, because she's just been blowing up everywhere, or Colleen Hoover, right? When you've reached that level, then they're interested in knowing what's happening in your life. But when you're brand new and they don't know anything about you yet, like they're not so intrigued in the back end of your of what's happening business wise, but they do want to know what you're writing about, what kind of story it is, what kind of other books it might be, like all of those types of things. So you really have to be very intentional on what you're posting on social media, and what you are doing your calls to action, and who you're following and engaging with. So for me, I'm at a really frustrating place right now because I really want to be marketing my book really hard, but we don't have the ARC ready yet, and we don't have the print on pre-order. So I'm kind of holding myself back as we're trying to get these last things ready to go, so that when I really start putting in my best foot forward on social media posts that I feel will attract the readers that I'm looking for, there's a call to action, so that I'm not wasting that opportunity for them to either get on the email list or go pre-order the book or any of those types of things. So, when you're out there, doing this type of thing, like you have to have a strategy around it, and you have to be engaging with others, and you have to be following and commenting and talking to other people and reviewing books or commenting on book review posts and things like that. So, that's been a big difference for me. And I have been trying to focus on really connecting with bookstagrammers and finding people who will be willing to read and promote the book during that launch time. But there's other things that I have been doing that are just really self-gratifying. I went to Paris to finish the book. So I've been posting a lot of my pictures from Paris, because I also feel like there's that audience of people who just love Paris. And if I can bring them into my love of Paris and things that I saw, then maybe not, maybe they'll be interested in looking at my book. But I'm also like throwing a really ridiculous book launch party for myself. Because I've been working on this thing for so long, and I've published all these books, and I've never had a book launch party. And it's just such a fun concept. We're throwing a throwback 1999 New Year's Eve party, because that's when the book is set. And, just having a blast with it. And so that allows me also the opportunity to promote and talk, and, what were you wearing on New Year's Eve, 1999? What were you doing? All those kinds of fun things. So
I love that. I mean, what I'm hearing is just, I hear so much enthusiasm and joy that, I mean, every time you're trying something new, that saying like new level, new devil, and it creeps in, it wants to speak to you, it wants to kind of get to you. But what I hear you doing, every single phase, you found a way to say, okay, yeah, you might be trying to creep on me a little bit, but this is how I'm going to overcome this. This is how I'm going to work through this. So to your point, you found things that were fun, or you're hosting, or you're looking forward to doing this, because when you're looking forward to doing that changes that energy. It goes from saying, I'm excited, and I take that energy of, oh my gosh, I'm a little nervous, and it's still there, but it's channeled into excitement and joy, versus, oh my gosh, what will happen? Did I not get it all done? I've done this amazing thing. So I love the shifts that I hear between working with the different phases, the giving yourself grace, the fact that you were listening to you were on walks, you get ideas, you jot them down. Absolutely. But all of those things showed how this book came together. And the fact is that it came together in its own time, but yet you honored and showed up every single time. And I think that, go, Alexa. That's awesome. I'm serious. I am so excited for you and for this book to come out, 4 Days in Paris. Oh, I'm so excited. So do you have any final words you'd like to share? And where can people connect with Lexi Haddock? And where can they get the book?
Yes. So just one, I guess my piece of advice is to your point, exactly, like, don't let the devil on your shoulder get you down, because Jen knows from personal experience, like, I've had moments of utter panic. Like, it's terrifying that this book is going to be awful. Like, that's the negative Nancy talking on my shoulder, saying, the imposter syndrome coming through. But the nice thing about having this long process and through all these reiterations and everything is that by the time the book has gotten to where it is, like, I do believe in it, and I believe it's going to be great. And I'm now having fun with it instead of being so stressed out. So I would say, own the fact that you're going to have those moments of panic and imposter syndrome, and know that you're not alone. Surround yourself with people who've been through this, and people who are going to be your cheerleaders, but also willing to provide that constructive criticism and feedback to help you get it to the next level, and accept their feedback, because that's the most important thing. Is that yes, it hurts to have somebody say this character is kind of dumb, or whatever. Like, I don't know what's happening in this scene or whatever, but the goal is to make it better, and to have a result where your readers aren't feeling that same thing. So yeah, that's my advice. And to go with that is give yourself enough time, and don't set a deadline for a book when you haven't even finished writing it yet. Don't set a publishing date until you're well through the editing process, because that timeline can shift dramatically. I wound up postponing my book launch multiple times, and that can be frustrating. So give yourself time. Where can people find me? I am on Lexi Haddock on Instagram, Lexi Haddock _author. We've just set up the lexihaddock.com website, and we are getting that ready for anybody who wants to come over and apply to join the ARC team. The ebook is on pre-order on Amazon, and we hope to have the print book up very shortly, depending on when this airs. It may already be up, and it actually publishes on December 6th, right before the holidays. It is a fun holiday story about New Year's Eve. So if you want to go get lost in a book about Paris and friendship and romance and dancing in nightclubs on New Year's Eve and all of those fun things that are throwback to 1999, I'm sure you'll enjoy this book.
I think this book is absolutely awesome. I totally love it, and I cannot wait to have my copy. So thank you so much for being on the show. I'm so proud of you, and I am so excited for this book to come out and to be in the hands of the readers who I know will love it.
Thank you, Jen. I appreciate you so much.